contribution to the climate change area come from energy production or energy consumption. And we need to pay attention to that, and that is the other significance of energy in the sustainability area. So a lot of research, development, and hard work, creative thinking, innovative thinking, entrepreneurship, there are opportunities up the galore for those who want to do it, is in the clean tech area, and I urge each and every one of you brilliant minds here to work towards that. With that, pass it back to Namit.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. So, Arpita, you get the opportunity to talk about yourself and about what you're doing in the DOE.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here with this distinguished panel. So I think just picking up where Dr. Ram left off, like we absolutely need both the public and private sector to work together to actually make this clean energy transition. And in my 20 plus years working on these issues, I've never seen the federal level of investment that's going to help catalyze the private sector in the way that the Biden administration has done over the last couple of years. So it's a very exciting time to be in the climate and energy space, and yes, echo the call to action to have all of you join us in the fight. I guess I'll just start. I mean, I think people have been thinking a lot about this as sort of modern industrial strategy, and where you're having federal spending be in those areas that the private sector is not currently. And so I think we'll go a little bit more in depth on this, but as you can see here, the Department of Energy where I work is really providing that support at every valley of death and at every technology readiness level, and it's really exciting to see that happen. As many of you know, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, is about $400 billion worth of investment into the climate and clean energy space. And what is interesting, and that they've done very well here, is that they're creating both supply and demand. So it's creating the demand through the federal incentives to, put solar on your roof, get an EV, as well as creating the manufacturing and supply chains to actually meet that consumer demand and on the supply side. So that's been really exciting to see. And here at the Department of Energy, this funding has enabled us to move from a research and development organization to really a demonstration deployment institution, and it's been really exciting to see. And just to go through some of our greatest hits, because you don't get to sort of talk through some of the successes. For a while it's been like, coming soon, here's all the stuff we're going to fund. But this year we did do a $7 billion investment into hydrogen hubs to really create this ecosystem of producers and suppliers and transportation to really spur the hydrogen industry. We put $8 billion into grid investment, the backbone of actually putting this renewable energy out there. And then we've invested, $5.5 billion in the domestic production of the battery and EV supply chain. In my office, in the Loan Programs Office, we've provided $13 billion into the actual manufacturing of supply chains here at home. And that's what's so great to see about this administration doing. It's not just about reducing greenhouse gases, which is absolutely critical. It's about onshoring and reshoring domestic manufacturing here. It's about ensuring that we're creating really good jobs, and it's about ensuring that we're also we're thinking about the folks who have actually been disadvantaged by the energy sector in the past and actually bringing them into the fold. So it's been really exciting to see. And then I'll just take a moment to talk about the Loan Programs Office. So we are, where we fall, I think you saw on the last chart, is on the further end of the technology readiness level. So we take proven technologies and we're there to scale. So the Inflation Reduction Act gave us up to $250+ billion of loan authority to really ensure that we're able to take the technologies that are ready to go and get them to deploy at scale. I think I'll just leave with this idea, though, that we are just there to be a catalyst. And so we're going to need, I think, close to $10 trillion of incremental private sector investment to actually get us where we need. And that's around like $300 billion a year of that private sector capital as follow-on investment. I think like last year we did close to like 140 to 150 billion. So we're really just, this is just the start, and we cannot, the government cannot do this alone. We're not supposed to do this alone. And what we talk about a lot is that this is private sector led, government enabled. So I'm just really excited to have such great both policy minds and private sector partners here to talk through how we actually make this a reality. And I think as we continue, I can talk a little bit more about the different places that DOE plays in that development.
Thank you, Arpita. I will now request Dr. Vijay to speak about the perspective of the private sector.
All right. Everybody can hear me? That's one of those self-evident questions, because if you couldn't hear me, how are you supposed to respond, right? So listen, thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and it's really an honor to be on this stage with you all. You know, there's only one thing that has connected everything that's happened at this conference so far. Only one, and that's energy. None of this could have happened without energy. Nothing in this room would have happened without energy. So when we talk about human progress, and we talk about how are you going to eradicate poverty, the pathway goes through energy. And Ram already showed you where we are on energy. We still have 1 billion people that don't have access to energy, 2 billion people are still using kind of biomass for cooking, and so that has to happen. So the first thing we have to recognize is this is a demand challenge. We have to meet demand, and there can be no gap in meeting that demand. So I see a bunch of blue t-shirts here, which I think is fantastic. So we have the young folks here who really, you want to understand what this means is, when my kids, you know, the first time we lost power, they thought it was exciting because they could be like pioneers and you could use candles and everything, until they realized they also lost internet. And now the power outage was real, okay? And I was like, this is not acceptable. When do we get power back, okay? So it is necessary, and yet it's almost impossible to explain, because you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't feel it. If you have it, you take it for granted. If you don't have it, you don't know what it is. So these 3 charts just talk about that, right? And I'm just building off what Ram said. The bottom line here is energy demand continues to grow. Developing nations and developed nations have different trajectories. But if we're going to grow the population from 8 billion to 10 billion people, we're going to have to grow the energy supply. That, when I started back in the dark ages, that was not a given, that we can actually meet the supply. There was really questions around, is there enough energy? Thankfully, because of technology, we now say we have more than enough energy to meet the demand. That in itself is a series of technology breakthroughs. But if you cut the slide, just flip the slide, we have a new problem. And the problem now is, okay, we still want you to meet the demand. Don't forget, this is a demand challenge. You have to meet the demand, but you also have to reduce emissions. Now, some would argue, well, that's not too hard. That's a 2-dimensional problem. Increase supply, decrease emissions. Yeah, not so simple. Because on the right, you can see that, well, on the left, you can see, well, actually, each country is going to be different. And on the right, you see, well, each sector is going to be different. And all of that has to come together. So you go from a very simple concept, increase supply, lower emissions, to almost like a Fibonacci sequence of variables. And it's going to be every country is going to do it differently. So the solutions for the US will not be the solutions for India. Solution for India will not be the solution for Singapore. It's going to be tying national security, which I know the Department of Energy is interested in. It's going to be tying economics. It's going to be tying climate. All of these have to come together. What is the common thread? If you turn the slide, it's technology. At the root, this is a technology challenge. And if it wasn't a technology challenge, we wouldn't be talking right now. Because if we had the technology to do what everybody wants to do, we'd be done. So by definition, we don't have the technology to do what we want to do. This is the IEA, International Energy Agency, clean energy tracking report that they put out each year. You can see the green, yellow, red. Green is on track, yellow, progress, but more progress needed, red, not on track. You got to squint to find the greens, okay? This is a global roll-up. As I said, this is actually oversimplifying the problem, because in each country you'll have your own report card, and in some countries you'd have more green than others, but macroscopically we have work to do, okay? What I've bolded here, originally Ram had asked me to talk about carbon capture, and you can tell that I like to talk about the broader issues, but carbon capture is a necessary technology. You can see how many times it's mentioned, but I will tell you it's embedded everywhere. You want to do power, you're not going to do power without carbon capture. Industrial sector, hard to decarbonize industries, you're going to need carbon capture. Direct air capture, whether you're taking it from a point source or you're taking it out of the environment, okay? So all of these have to work. That's what we're here to talk about. That's what Amrita's trying to do. That's what Arpita's trying to do. She's trying to say, how do we get loans out there? Academics are trying to teach. The national labs are trying to go forward. Companies like ours are trying to scale technologies. All of it has to come together. So I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Vijay. I will invite John to give their perspective from the nuclear part.
Great. So I'm John Kotek with the Nuclear Energy Institute. We're a trade association, represents about 350 companies, national labs, universities, and others involved in the civil nuclear energy sector here in the US. And so wanted to explain just a little bit about why you're hearing so much more about nuclear these days as more and more countries and more companies seek to decarbonize. It really comes down to what you see in this chart here. And this is from a paper that came out of MIT about 5-6 years ago. And what the authors of this paper found was that if you're trying to get to a zero carbon electric grid, you can do it a lot more affordably if you have what they call firm low carbon generation as part of your system, right? So they looked at two cases. The first was you try to do the whole job with what they called fuel saving resources. So think of things without a fuel, like wind, solar, coupled with what they called fast burst technology, right? And that's your short duration storage. If you try to do it just using those technologies, it costs you a lot more than if you add this third wedge of the pie. This is what they called firm low carbon generation. Now today that generally means nuclear. In the future I expect it's also going to mean gas with carbon capture. It's going to mean deep geothermal. There are going to be other technologies that play in that space too. Okay? But nuclear has a huge role to play in helping us get to an affordable, reliable, low carbon energy system. Let's go to the next slide. That revelation, right, has started to really take hold outside of the analytical space, but into industry where I work and into governments. That's why you saw on the margins of the recent COP 28, you saw 22 countries come together and pledge that they're going to aim to triple nuclear energy generation by 2050 as a part of an effort to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Now, of course, that's going to come with a big increase in wind, big increase in solar, big increase in storage, carbon capture, you name it. There are going to be other technologies that play a role there. But it shows you that the vital role that nuclear can play is increasingly appreciated by policymakers. And it's not just about the grid, right? I included this other press release here from Dow and a company called X-Energy, which is an advanced reactor developer here in the state of Maryland, to show you that more and more companies are starting to look at nuclear as a source of things like process heat, low carbon hydrogen, or other non-electric sources of energy that can help us bring down carbon emissions in sectors that we think of as very difficult to decarbonize. So you're going to continue hearing more and more about the role that nuclear can play in getting to that affordable, reliable, low carbon energy system, whether that's on the grid or beyond, and I look forward to engaging the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I will ask Dr. Cheng to talk his perspective from the academia side.
So you hear me well? Yes. So my first visit to India was actually to IIT New Delhi. And that was
Can't hear him.
I think there's an electrical reason.
There you go.
So in 1994-95, I was a program director at U.S. National Science Foundation, and I gave a grant for the U.S. researchers, professors to go to India, attend the India National Power Conference. And I decided to go myself also, and I remember a conversation with an old gentleman, and we were talking about environment and energy and so forth, and he was telling me because of deforestation, the temperature can go up to more than 50 degrees Celsius. I still remember that conversation from 30 years ago because it's a big issue. Now, of course, 30 years after, we are dealing with global warming and carbon dioxide, and after 30 years, if I'm talking to a person of that age, I would call him a young person. So now, I'm a power system person. Why and where is my relevance here? Electrical grid is like a pool of water. And renewable or the power plant, they put water into the pool. And Exxon Mobil oil refinery, all the residential customers, you take water out of the pool. And so if you keep a proper balance, then you have proper reserve of water to keep supply demand going well. If you put too much water too fast or pull too much water too fast, you will make waves. The same with the electrical grid. It's just a little more complicated. So there is an issue when we are trying to deal with the global warming, and we're going to put a lot of renewables into the grid. And this is the engineering problem that we have to deal with. And most of that is actually new engineering problems, surprisingly. So the first one is that imagine when the sun is setting. Well, when the sun comes up, then in place like California, the electrical demand viewed from the utility company, it will go down a lot. And that's not because the electrical load disappears, it's because the rooftops pick that up. And now, when the sun is almost setting, you can imagine the rooftops are becoming useless, and then utility has to pick it up. And how does utility come up with that much power within that short of time to try to keep your lights on? That is the engineering challenge. And so that's one example, that engineering problem, engineering solutions have to be there. It's actually there to solve that kind of problem today. Second problem is extreme weather. Okay, I think we are all aware of this. And maybe the wake-up call was the Sandy hurricane in 2012. I think the cost of the extended power outage is like $70 billion or something like that. The Hurricane Maria is more recent in Puerto Rico. I think 2017. I think the cost is $90 billion, and it took 11 months to get your power back. Your kids without internet for 11 months. It will be a huge disaster. Now, why is this a problem that we have not solved? Because traditionally, the utility industry, the power industry, use a criteria design. It's primarily to reduce the number of power outages and to reduce the duration of power outages. So that's the main design criteria. However, it does not say that when there's a huge power outage, you shall have the ability to recover really soon. That is the new challenge. And in order to do that, how are you going to do that? You got to have all these communities, industrial park. You all have your generation power plants, and you're able to connect it up and wire up your sort of a local microgrid to keep your lights on. And that is not quite there yet. Today, you still primarily make it passive in the sense that you wait for utility to recover and then bring power back to you. But the opportunity is there now, because with all these renewable energy we are building, you have wind, you have solar, you have battery, you have small generators. When you put all that local resources together, if you have a way to put a control layer on that, or microgrid, then all of a sudden we have a solution that will be there no matter what, because we already built that generation resources to deal with the global warming problem. So that's an opportunity. Let me just quickly mention one more thing, the cyber issue. Now imagine we are now connecting all these renewables, and they are all connected. I mean, in the sense of internet, or in a power industry, it will not be a public access internet, but it will be more like a proprietary access. And so when you have all this high-level connectivity, you also have vulnerability. And probably the best-known example was the 2015 big power outage in Ukraine. This is way before the war. And so there was a power outage for extended how many hours, and a few 100,000 people got affected. And that was because the first one publicly reported as a cyber attack to shut down the power. And so this is important. And how do we resolve that issue? The simple answer is that we have to be able to look at the cyber system, or the IT, and the physical system, the power grid, put it together, so you'll be able to find what's the worst case impact on the power grid when you have a cyber attack.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. I think we're opening up to question and answers, and we've received some questions. So I'll just read a couple of them and see how it goes from there. Can I ask a question? No, you have to put it to the Q&A app, please. So I'm just going to follow that. Sorry about it. We just need to follow the process. So the question is, I think this question could be for Arpita. How does DOE support innovation and deployment of clean energy technology at every valley of death?
Great. I think if you actually go back to my slide, can sort of go through some of the, and provide an example. So, yeah, as you can see, we have at each phase, there's an ability for any of these offices to actually really help drive forward. So Office of Science focuses more on the basic research, which are 17 national labs. We're trying to really do the fundamental science, and now more increasingly, a lot of the demonstration and deployment type science that we're going to need for the next generation of technologies to solve those technology challenges. And then when you get a little further down the line and you're ready for like your Series A, that type of, you want to launch into that arena, but you're not quite there yet, we have ARPA-E, which is able to really support early stage technology that is not yet to commercialization. So one really great example of this is a $189 million loan guarantee that the Loan Programs Office just gave to LongPath, which does methane emissions monitoring. So this is, again, Loan Programs Office will only fund something that's the technology is ready, but this company was actually an ARPA-E recipient. They were able to, they were, in that risky valley of death, they got ARPA-E money. They were able to get more of the equity they needed to launch their business. And then when they were ready, they came to us for debt financing. So it's really, we are not very user-friendly. Department of Energy hasn't been, and we're working on it. But if you have ideas, if you have technologies, if you're doing research and want to figure out what resources there are, please do look at Department of Energy, because there's a lot of money out there right now.
Thank you. The next question is, I think, on the nuclear part of it. It says, nuclear plant safety is a commonly voiced concern. So how does how does your institute play a role in trying to do that?
Yeah, and so a couple of things worth noting there. One, we've been running commercial nuclear power plants for more than 60 years. Folks have learned a lot, right? And as a result, you've seen changes in both the way that today's reactors are operated that have led to tremendous safety performance, but you've also seen those understandings included in the next generation of technology. So when you look at what's on offer today, you'll find that many of the technologies that are out there rely much more, for example, on things like gravity and natural convection rather than pumps and valves, right, to move coolant around the reactor. Because at the end of the day, what nuclear safety, at least from a public safety standpoint, comes down to is you got to keep the fuel cool, all right? You got to make sure there's enough coolant going past the fuel to keep it from overheating. And the designs we see today use a lot more just natural laws of physics to make that happen. And as a result, what you're going to see coming forward in the next generation of nuclear is going to be even better than what we've got today.
Thank you. So I think a lot of leaders have spoken about the COP28 and the impact it has made. Do you think, I think it's open to all the panelists, anyone can answer, do you think COP28 accomplished adequate progress?
It sure did for nuclear, right? I mean, we saw the tripling pledge. We saw any number of countries come out and declare their intentions to expand their national programs. And so, yeah, nuclear isn't going to solve all the problems, but from our industry's perspective, the progress over the last handful of years has been tremendous.
Well, I mean, I think some of us were at COP. I would say, first off, this is a complicated problem. I think if you have one takeaway from this, it's complicated. And so the key word is and. There's no exclusive solution. It's going to be this and that and that and that. And so I would say two things about COP, two words that I use to describe it. One, it was inclusive. So it was very broad. All industries were there. 200 plus countries were there. It was very inclusive. The discussions were very productive. And the second word I'd use is it was necessary. So it was a global stock take. It was discussions around how much progress has been made, because progress has been made. Mm-hmm. There was also discussion on how much more progress has to be made. And there was a lot of discussion on acceleration, right? Second derivative. Not speed, but acceleration to scale. And so if you look at some of the DOE slides, one of the things that we've been working on, so it's going to take collaboration in different levels, public-private collaboration differently. The DOE is going a long way to facilitate that. The other thing I think it's going to take doing things in parallel. So TRL1 to TRL9 takes too long. If you can handicap at TRL1 potential for scale, you can start selecting technologies a lot faster. So parallel processing, things like that. But I think it was a very successful COP.
Thank you, Vijay, and John, for your perspective. So there is a question on the renewable energy. It says, is it technically possible to achieve a power grid 100% renewable energy? Dr. Chen?
Maybe I can try that one. So, and the short answer is that, yes, if you're lucky that you have a neighbor who can support you. And so if you're looking at, exception will be like Norway, and almost all hydro. And so it's already almost 100% renewable, so they don't need much help. But then if you look at a country like Denmark, it's not all hydro, but they are connected to all the big European grid. And so if you are 100% renewable operating, all of a sudden the solar power comes down or the wind power comes down, your neighbor can help you. But if you're an islanded power grid, then you're out of luck.
But you know, the question is, can you get a zero emission grid? In my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. Renewables is one way to do it, but the other is, again, and integrating firm power in with renewables. Remember, the goal here is increase supply, decrease emissions. So the question is really critical. The question is, can you get a zero emission grid? That's a different question. I think we have more degrees of freedom in answering that.
Yeah, I think I just looked at the questions which came up from the app. So thank you, everybody, for that perspective. So I would request Dr. Ram to basically give an overall summation of what you think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to the audience to start with. First of all, you are our encouragement. Thank you to the panelists for really bringing a very, very comprehensive view and perspective on energy. Recognize that there is no magic bullet. Are you willing to give up energy and be sustainable, have no climate change, but there won't be any living for yourselves at all at this point? There is no magic switch, there is no magic bullet. Things have to happen, and like Vijay said, this is a complex problem which is going to require the corporate sector, such as what Vijay was talking about, various forms of energy, such as they talked about the fossil fuel, the nuclear energy, hydrogen, solar, other renewables, and an extremely stable grid that ensures that not only is electricity available to people, it's accessible to people, and is secure as well. Energy security in itself, a very, very major issue. Can any of these things be made to happen without government support? I don't think so, because all of these issues involve externality. Externalities almost inevitably require participation from the government sector, and it can be both the carrot and stick. Where you have the stick, it says, you are mandated to do X, Y, Z, thou shalt make these changes. But here, what we heard from Arpita is some very significant carrot approach where they're encouraging entrepreneurship, innovation, and inventions. And that's where most of you should be shining. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. And I know everybody put their questions through the app and everything. So, Mr. Gentleman, if you want to ask that question once last, we have a minute to catch up. Just a minute.
Time to give them an applause, please. We're going to share some gifts with the participants.
I thought they were pizzas.
And
I thought they were pizzas.
can you take some pictures?